Hello everybody, this is Tahir here from Odeberg Permaculture Farm, and we are well into spring, and all activities on the farm are now focused for preparing everything for the coming growing season in the summer months ahead. And primarily we're working with the soil, and we're preparing soils across the different systems on the farm, from our vegetable gardens, food forests, and like here in our pasture or agroforestry systems, we are reconditioning some of the systems so that they are more productive over the summer. And how we do this is to start by loosening and deepening the topsoil profile using a tractor drawn device called a subsoiler. And this video is going to take a look at subsoiling and the different applications of subsoiling on an agricultural scale on the farm. And it's a process by which we open up the soil without tilling it. So it's essentially a no-till approach, whereby we use the implement to cut deep grooves into the soil and to lift it up and to allow atmospheric gases and moisture into the soil, which are the prerequisites of a healthy soil life. And the process is very, very low impact, and it does very little damage to the existing plant ecosystem. And I believe that this is the most effective way of building healthy soils on a farm scale. So in this video we're going to look at rehabilitating damaged land, and we're going to look at preparing land for planting, and we're going to look at conditioning existing lands to improve productivity using the subsoiling plow. Right here you can see we're busy subsoiling with a fork, which is the traditional method of loosening soil. So the soil's not actually being turned in any way, it's just been loosened and aerated, and this is just a very basic standard gardening practice. This garden bed has been prepared now. It's had a chicken tractor run through it for about 6 weeks, and the chickens have kind of compacted it, although they've pooed throughout it and they've nutrified it. Now we're loosening the soil with forks so that moisture and air can get in, and the soil environment is ideal for the soil life to continue processing the organic matter that's in the soil and the chicken manure and transforming it into humus. So this on a smaller scale is really what we're doing in the fields with the subsoiler, and this is exactly the same result, and it's the most harmonious way one can open up soil and prepare it for cropping. Right, so what we're going to do now is have a look at the subsoiling unit itself, and there are many different types and there are many different designs, and they all roughly do the same thing. They open up the soil by chiseling it without turning it, but some subsoilers are better than others, and this is what we've got to look at. So, you know, the Rolls Royce of subsoilers is the yeoman's plow, and the yeoman's plow was developed by P.A. Yeomans, the creator and generator of the Keyline farm planning system, and he really pioneered the use of subsoiling on contour to open up and improve soil quality, increase water infiltration. And you know what, once you open up a soil environment, you're going to get oxygen and you're going to get moisture, and those are the two prime ingredients that you need to encourage soil life. And any plant matter that's growing in the area that you kill off when you subsoiling, any bushes, stuff you break up, that will decompose in the subsoil lines or the rip lines, and it will add fertility. So let's have a look at this one. This is an Aitchison. It's a New Zealand heavy-duty subsoiler, but the principles are very clear in this, and so we're going to have a look. So it's a 3-shank subsoiler. So it's got 3 shanks. You can see them there. And the more shanks you have, the more horsepower you need. All right. But you do get subsoilers of many more shanks, 5 shanks and even more. The rule of thumb with the subsoiler is that you have to at least have a subsoiler, a shank behind each wheel, because that pattern arrangement loosens the soil that the tractor compacts. It's really important, because otherwise you're defeating the purpose of the subsoiling if you can't loosen up where the tractor tires have driven. You know, with 1 shank you're going to be doing a lot of overlap plowing, and that's going to use an incredible amount of diesel and time. I have done 2-shank subsoiling, but you also have to do that overlapping, and so it takes twice as long. So 3 shanks you can do a run, and then you can move next to that run and do another one, and it's much quicker. Let's have a look at the characteristics of this. Firstly, you need a sturdy frame, because there's a lot of pressure being exerted in the process of subsoiling. So you need a really solid frame that's not going to bend or snap or crack in the process. So let's actually then have a look at the shanks, because that is the most important part of the entire system. All right, so what you're going to have is, I just want to get some of the soil off this so you can see. I might have to move to the other one. You're going to have a foot, all right, at the base, and here it is here. All right, now this is basically going to be moving through the soil parallel to the surface at the required depth that you're going to be subsoiling at. And it's very important that this foot moves through the ground as smoothly with as little resistance as possible. As you can see, there's absolutely hardly any angle on the foot of the subsoiler. It's almost horizontal. There's a slight angle. I'd say we probably got like about a 5% angle on that foot before it hits the main arm of the shank. All right, so it's flat. There's no resistance. It goes through the ground smoothly. It's relatively broad, but not too broad, in the sense that it creates an underground tunnel as it moves along, and it exerts a force upwards that kind of breaks the surface. So if you're watching while you're driving, you'll actually see the ground shaking as it goes through. And then it's got a shoe on it, which is designed to wear away and be replaced, so the main body of the shank never gets damaged and it lasts forever. Okay, and so that particular dimension is very important. You can't have a sharp angle to it, because it's going to start pulling subsoil up to the surface. So you've got to have this flat foot so that the soil just spreads around it, very much like water going around the hull of a boat. All right, then the actual arm of the entire shank is important. You can see it's very thick on the depth of it. Okay, so it's very strong, but it's extremely thin. It's not very thick here. If you look at it across, you'll see that it's very, very thin. It means it disturbs the soil as little as possible. Okay, it creates as little resistance as possible as it moves through the soil. It's very thin, and this is assisted by what we call a shin guard. All right, now that shin guard does the same thing. It protects the shank from getting worn away and damaged, and you can see the wear points. You can see more or less the depth I'm able to work at. Really, mostly I'm working here 30 centimeters, but I get down to 50 centimeters. And this shin guard is actually sharp. So I'll try and get in here so you can see that it has a sharp edge to it, which enables it to cut through the soil. And then at the base of the arm, or the leg if you want to call it that, there's this pattern here to help the soil spread. And you spread around the shank, and it's very much like the yeoman's design, where they trying to imitate the movement of a dolphin through water. Okay, so I've made my own shanks as well, and I will go and film them so you can see so that you can make your own subsoiler as well. And so you don't have to buy one as long as you've got a frame. Right, let's take a look at the shanks that I had made up by an local engineer in town. Very simple, basic, and I had them made for this frame, just for lighter work, because the existing shanks in the subsoil are very heavy duty, and it's quite heavy for the tractor to haul around. So I had these made, and these are actually very effective if you don't have really thick, heavy, rocky soils. They work very well. And you know, the principle is very much the same. Okay, so we've got a foot on the shank. It's a foot, it's just a piece of square tubing with the back welded closed. There you can see it. And then we had a plate welded onto the front of the square tubing at a gentle angle, much like the angle of the foot on the subsoiler. So you can see it here. There we go. And then we just got a standard shoe. You get this at any agricultural cooperative, agricultural supply place, shop, depot, whatever you want to call it in your own country. Standard, very, very basic shoe. Cheap. It just bolts on through the top. See it here at the bottom. Bolts through there. And then I just got some rectangular metal which was ground to a point in the front. No shin guard. It's not very deep, but it's strong enough, and you can see that it's thin. It's the main thing. It's not very thick, so it slices through the soil easily. And this one is can get down to just about a meter in. You can see how deep I've gone with it before. And then it bolts onto the frame, because my frame bolt-on points are offset square tubes. I had to do the same. So I had 3 of them made, and then it just bolts onto the frame like that. It's reinforced over here because there's a lot of pressure on it here. Very strong plate metal, but didn't cost much money, and you can have something like this made up for just about any frame shape. So I've got 3 of them, and it works very well. So you don't actually have to go out there and buy your own subsoiler. You just need a frame, which you can pick up second hand just about anywhere, and then have the shanks made to this kind of universal shoe. And it's not expensive at all, and it does the job perfectly. So this particular pattern opens the soil up underground, and it creates a very narrow cut in the earth through from the surface. There's very little resistance to the movement of these shanks through the earth. Now, you know, a Rolls Royce like the yeoman's plough has all the bells and whistles. It's got a crumble roller at the back, And that crumble roller pushes the soil down. It's lifted up by the subsoiling shank. And it also has a coultier or a cutting disc in front of each shank to cut the turf or the soil surface open so it doesn't rip big chunks out of the ground as it goes along. And so it creates a much neater profile in the soil. And that's ideal, but it's not necessary. Okay, we've been doing subsoiling between the swales on this reclaimed and restored old field system, and we've subsoiled. This is the 4th time now since 2015 when we first swaled and did subsoiling. And so not every winter, but whenever there's good winter rains, we come in and we subsoil. And the idea is to open the soil up gradually, because previously this was a production field. This is now decades ago, and they abandoned it and it got washed out. Water's come off that ridge there, crossed the road, and caused serious gully erosion. And so we filled the gullies in and put the swales in to prevent this from happening, but the topsoil was gone, down to subsoil, in some cases almost bedrock. And most of the topsoil ended up at the bottom of the valley, and there's good succession there where that topsoil is. We've had a lot of rain lately, so the swales still have water in, and we just waited for the land to dry a bit so that the machine wouldn't get stuck. And then we came in and basically broke the crust, because you can see here what subsoiling does. It's not like plowing. It doesn't till the soil, it turn it open. It just cuts these grooves in as deep as the implement will go, and we run on contours, so parallel to the swales, and it creates the perfect infiltration pattern between the swales. So when rain falls, it can't run, it infiltrates. Okay, so the first time we did this, there was absolutely no vegetation here at all, just this hard cap. Yeah, you can see it, this hard crust cap. Okay, it's like a layer that seals the soil off from the atmosphere, from rain, from atmospheric gases. It's a cap. Nothing can penetrate it. It blazes hot in summer, rain just runs off in winter, and essentially the soil is dead, and you need to break the capping. So this is what the subsoiling does. You know, even in this situation, livestock is of no use whatsoever. Trampling or the hoof impacted, the cap is just too strong. And every time we've gone through, we've broken it up, but it's reformed itself, because the soil tilth is really bad. There's no organic matter. The particle space is very close and compact. It's like a clay subsoil. There's no oxygen. There's no soil life. So the first step was just to open the soil up, to let oxygen in, let in atmospheric gases, let moisture in, and then wind-blown seed, water-carried seed settles, and we start to get a pioneering process going, and the first bit of land cover arises. So we've had a lot of succession over the years, and these are all pioneers in this Renosterveld ecosystem. A lot of succulents, and with the loosened soil, the root system can get down and in, and the plants can get hold, because now they've got moisture and their roots can penetrate into the ground, and they immediately start to alter the soil environment and build it. And so over the years of successive subsoiling, we've had a lot of plants establish themselves, and succession has started. You can see there's still water in the swales, and we've still got some subsoiling to do in that terrace up there, which we'll film. But basically, before we started today, this is what the ground looked like. So hard, impenetrable, almost like pavement. You can see the old rip lines are filled in, and that's why you've got to keep going until your succession is complete. So here we've actually had really good soil building occur. The soil's much darker, moister, softer, and so when it rains, the water's going to go now into this rip line. Seed's going to go into the rip line, and we're going to get a row of vegetation coming up in the rip line, and there's going to be no runoff, and we're just slowly hydrating this area which previously was dehydrated and lifeless. So you can see how solid some of the soil was. I mean, this is like a brick that the subsoil just picked up. It's like a giant clod. Here it's particularly hard, and with all the rain we've had, I mean, this month we've had 80 mils of rain. We've already passed our annual average, and we're only in early July. No water has penetrated it, or it's dry as a bone, dusty. And that's because it's capped. So here you can see the effect of the subsoiler. You can see the subsoiled area and the area that hasn't been subsoiled. So the texture has already been created to infiltrate water. So we'll just do this to the entire terrace, which is the area that exists between the two swales. Alright, so we're going to have a look at the subsoiling process. Alright, so we're basically done, and what we have is a controlled disturbance at the end of the day, and nature really likes a controlled disturbance because that tends to break up old stale patterns that establish themselves and will remain unchanged until there is a disturbance of one form or another. So this is a interjection into a stale landscape where the mineral cycle is operating extremely slowly and the water cycle is largely ineffective, and so this is now going to just give it a boost, a kickstart, break that stale pattern, open everything up to the next level of evolution or succession. So now we've got the ideal environment for water infiltration. We've broken the crust. There are areas here of really nice soil, and other areas where it's still got a long way to go. So, you know, it's interesting to see how over the years we've actually improved the soil condition, because when we started here, the vast majority of this particular area looked like this. You know, here it's very shallow before you get onto like serious bedrock and you start pulling stuff up like this. So, you know, in the longer run, we're going to have our production trees on swale, and then, you know, hopefully in time we'll have a mixed herb land in between, combination of native herbs and grasses, and, you know, it can be grazed now and then after decent rain. And, you know, we're no longer subsoiling down here because that it's unnecessary. That process is finished here. We've had really good succession. This was not covered in vegetation like this when we started at all. This is all a result of previous subsoiling. So further down the valley the soils are a bit deeper, so we could get deeper in with the subsoiler, and so we opened the soil more, and that allowed these tap-rooted forbs or herbs to establish themselves. And you can see the old rip lines here, they're still present. They still create a texture, contour based texture to infiltrate water, and you know, we've got a decent succession happening here, and there's a good land cover. It's by no means comprehensive, but it's well on its way. It's at the point of self-regulation. You can see the swale is actually just, you can see how far in I've gone. It's big and it's just full with vegetation. The seed has just been carried down by successive years of storms and flood rains, and it's been deposited in the swale, and the swale has become a hydrated contour where vegetation has now established and succession is well on its way. It's dense, diverse, the sun never shines on the floor of the swale, and we're getting plants in here now that, you know, we've got our first grasses coming up. You can see that would not grow in that harsher environment, and the same goes for down here. We only subsoiled down here twice. We've done this twice, and those terraces up there we've done 4 times, and we probably will do them again. You know, because what happens is each time you subsoil, the water gets in and stays in, and that softens the soil underneath a bit more, and that allows you, if you come in a bit later in the season, just to get further down. And so it's a gradual softening and opening up of the soil, and it's very cheap. It doesn't cost money, a bit of diesel and time and a little bit of skill in driving, because if you don't know what you're doing, you will break equipment very easily, because the forces at play here are powerful. You can destroy tractor gearboxes and hydraulic systems very easily, and so you need to know what you're doing. And if you can avoid damaging equipment, then it doesn't cost much at all to get ecosystem processes functioning effectively again in areas that once were degenerating very rapidly. Okay, so what we're going to look at here is another application of subsoiling, and that's land preparation. And we've seen it as part of a land rehabilitation application where we're dealing with really eroded, hard, compact soils and how to revitalize them. And here we're going to have a look at how we can use subsoiling to prepare land for new systems integration. So we've got an agroforestry system here. We've got an established lucerne system between swale-based contours with apple trees planted on swales. So it's very, very late in winter, or should I say rather very early second day of spring. So everything's still very dormant, but this is why we're preparing land now so that we can plant more trees. So we've got a swale running along the top of the system. We've got a belt of olives, and then we've got the swale which is catching water running off that ridge. It also takes overflow from our spring, and then we've got an alley or a terrace or a pasture system, and then we've got another swale which basically is designed to take overflow from, if we want to direct it there, from the spring, and in the case of very heavy flooding, if that topsoil overflows. But this corner of the system we have not yet planted up, and that's mainly been due to prolonged drought, which we are now out of. So now that we're well and truly out of the drought, and it's the beginning of spring, now is the time to begin the preparation of the land. So the swales are providing the stability in the system, and then between the swales we, as we've seen earlier on, we subsoil to create that sponge effect, so that there's total water infiltration and that we open up the soils. So here we've got a nice deep silt loam, and we've decided we're going to be planting pecan nut trees here. So we're going to do 2 rows of pecan nut trees, 5 trees in each row, 10 trees, 10 meter spacing between row. And so what we did is we went through with the tractor and the subsoiler. I've subsoiled here 2 times before, so this is the 3rd run, and it was very easy. And the timing of the subsoiling was a few days after rain, so the soil was moist at the back end of the winter rain season, so that moisture is very deep, so the soil opens up very easily, but the soil's not too wet so that the tractor gets stuck or creates a quagmire. And so now the area is ready for marking out and the drilling of holes for the trees. So we'll have a look at that, but we're going to have a closer look now to see what the subsoiling process has done in that field. So I'm standing just behind the swale, which forms the anchor point at the top of the field, and everything below this will be stable. And we did the subsoiling yesterday, so we can just take a look. So many farmers, what they'll do when they prepare land, they'll come in with a type of subsoil, or what they call a deep ripper, and they'll rip the field up in a cross pattern, and then they'll follow up with a plow. So they'll plow everything up, and that will turn the soil, destroy the soil horizon, and yeah, it releases a flush of nutrients, but basically with the soil horizon and the soil life process completely scrambled, you start to lose fertility. And this is why subsoiling is such an important approach, because it's a non-tillage approach. We're not turning the soil, we're opening it up. And so you can see most of the vegetation is unscathed. Some of the kraalbos, which is a very hardy pioneer you get here, is pulled out, and we've piled it up, and we'll take the rest of it out because it's not what we want for land cover. But what you can see is you have these grooves that are cut in the soil pattern, as we've seen in the other applications, and what it feels like when you walk on it is very soft and spongy, which is exactly what we're after. And now we've got a really well aerated, soft, loose, open soil. And what we will do next is we will mark out and drill the holes for the trees, and it means that once the trees are planted, their root area is not restricted, and it can move out along contour, which is the direction we would like to see it move in. So if I have a look at these rip lines here, they are quite deep. It does depend on the density of your soil, the strength of your tractor, and the size of your subsoiler, how deep you can get. But my hand, you see, I was trying to get myself out of the shadow. I've just pushed my hand right into the soil, no problem. It's very soft, and you know, we've subsoiled successively. So the first time we subsoiled, we couldn't get very deep. The soil was quite compact. The second time we could get deeper, and this time I could get almost right down to the extent of the subsoiling implement's shanks. Alright, so we've laid out 2 rows here. So pecan nut's a big tree, and so it needs a lot of space to grow, and it also has a wide spreading, very competitive root system. So we've got 2 rows in. The trees are 6 meters apart, and the row spacing is 10 meters. And we put the first row very close to the swale, because we want them to put their roots in under there. And then we've pegged where we want the trees. I don't want them too far apart because I don't want them too big. I'm going to prune them. Big trees are hard to harvest. and they use a lot of water. So the row runs off there, put sticks in the ground marking where the holes are going to be drilled, and now we're going to drill the holes using PTO powered auger, which is an essential tool for farms, permaculture farms, because they have a lot of trees. Here's the second row running off that way. 10 trees in all in this area. Okay, so the hole auger is one of our most useful tools. I don't know if it's actually in the best place to film. No. Alright, so we finished drilling holes. So after we drill each hole, we fill it in with soil, and then the holes are marked again with stakes, so we know that this is the hole that the tree goes in, and it's about 80 centimeters to a meter deep, which is what this auger does. So we've got a contour-based agroforestry system, and we will add diversity into it later. Our objective now is to bring the subsoiler back and to run the subsoiler along the contour the trees are planted on, just to decompact where the drilling tractor has compacted, and yeah, so it's nice and open for the tree roots to spread. So yeah, we'll do our subsoiling now again, and then that's basically it. The next step is going to be planting the trees and putting the irrigation in. Alright, so the system has been implemented. We have planted the pecan nut trees into the holes, and each tree has been given what we call a tree pan around its base. So it's like a basin or a bowl that's full of mulch to keep the moisture in and to prevent weed growth. And that mulch is basically just chipped wood from the farm. It will break down and keep the soil fertile. And then we've planted comfrey. You see it just coming up here all the way around the edge of the basin. And that will grow into a nice thick edging that we will constantly chop and drop to add fertility to support the tree as it grows. And each tree receives this treatment, and it provides the ideal context for infiltration of water and nutrients, and prevents any form of erosion or capping, because the sun can't shine on the soil around it. And then as the tree gets bigger, we will make the basin, or what we call the tree pan around it, larger. And that basin will basically, in the case of the pecan, probably just cover almost half the canopy area. Smaller trees, it'll be generally runs around the drip line. We are going to prune, so we'll see how big we make them, but it's a level water infiltration, nutrient infiltration space, and in time we'll plant legume ground cover and possibly some herbs. And then in between the tree rows, we're not going to irrigate, we're just going to manage the recovery and establishment of native land cover. mainly succulent and hardy herbs, so it'll be like a mixed succulent herb ecosystem in between, very much a reflection of the natural ecosystem. And then the trees will be accessible for harvesting and management, and the nutrient will be coming into the basin underneath the trees. We'll throw compost in there over time, rock dusts. We'll run chickens through once the trees are larger and established in the area, and their root network is everywhere. Then we'll bring chickens in here, as, in electric netted mobile chicken tractors to manage fertility further. And this system will be stable and highly productive. Some of the trees have just started to push out their first leaves now. The comfrey's already up. It's just been a week. And the irrigation system is very simple. It's microjet sprayers, and as the trees get bigger, we'll turn the water pressure up and they'll spray a wider and wider area. But at the moment we just manage it so that the sprayers spray the pans. And that's it. Very simple system in place, and over time it will go through succession and evolve into stability and productivity. And our considerations of access, ease of harvest, and similarity of management is why we planted the same species in this area, and the diversity will be in the ground cover ecosystem within the orchard system and on the swale mound behind it, and in a hedgerow that will eventually be grown all the way around the system in the longer run. But at the moment we're just busy with the pioneering of this and getting it established. So what we've had a look at so far is restoring damaged land using the subsoiling process. We've looked at preparing land for planting the subsoiling process, and now we're looking at managing land with the subsoiling process. So what we have here is a olive-based agroforestry system with lucerne and indigenous clumping grass pasture between the trees. So we've got young olives growing on contour. We've got a swale here, and this system has been going now since 2015, which is when we subsoiled and managed it last on the whole. But over the years of grazing and lucerne baling, it's been 10 years now, the soil unavoidably becomes compact and hard, and growth rates and productivity in the pasture rows starts dropping off dramatically. And you start to see the emergence of deep tap-rooted weeds, such as the plantain, which is from the Plantago family. You can see it here. And it's a surefire indicator that your soils are now compact. It really likes compact soil, and it comes in to loosen it up naturally. So what's been happening is that this stuff is spreading dramatically, and the lucerne is not growing very high anymore. And it's really at the situation it's in not worth the water we put on it in terms of the yield we get off. Obviously the trees are a different matter altogether. So what we've been doing over the last 2 years is actually loosening up and changing it slightly. So this area I'm walking in now has already been done, and what we've done is we pulled the subsoiling plough through here with the tractor, and we've introduced a pasture mix of tall fescue grass in, a little bit of Eragrostis curvilinear, not much, and that's come up between the lucerne. And this area here that I'm walking in has been deeply loosened up to as deep as it's possible. I mean, we're on a riverine terrace, so when you get down to about 50 centimeters in the soil, you start to hit rock, and the subsoiling unit just can't get any deeper. But the change has been quite dramatic. We're early spring still, so the lucerne hasn't really started growing. The tall fescue grass is definitely more winter active, but we've got a very tight land cover now. There's no exposed soil. There's no unwanted weeds, and there's no plantain here. You can see this, and it's primarily because it has already been loosened up when we did this replanting. There's the odd chap here and there, but this is where I want it. So we decided in spring this year we were going to do the rest of the field. So this section up to the swale, which catches water coming off the road in big storms, we've done already. But now we're preparing this land to do exactly the same. And so the first step really is to go through with the subsoiling plough to open it up, to loosen the soil without turning it. And so far this is where we're at. I've been going at it for about 45 minutes, and my staff are following up with forks, just breaking up any of the clods that the system pulls up. You know, because as we go along with it, and you'll see now, every now and then we hit some rocks and I'm forced to lift the subsoil, and then it kind of clods a bit. But you can see the rows are very neat. The soil has not been tilled. When I walk on it, it feels very spongy and soft. And so now we've got infiltration of moisture, atmospheric gases, and immediately this pasture is going to recover. The lucerne loves getting its root system disturbed, so it's going to go through a revitalization process. The plantain is naturally going to drop away now because the conditions for its growth are no longer present, and we're going to plant later today tall fescue grass into these rip lines, and so we can get this dense cover happening so that we don't get any more running grasses and plantain coming up. And so we'll have a similar mixture to down there. And so it's going to be predominantly a grass and lucerne pasture between olives. Now these are young olives and they're starting to grow really fast now. And so, you know, they sat for a year or so just eking along, and now they're starting to push. And very soon we're going to have these well-sheltered alleys. It's quite a bit of wind down here. Olives handle wind really well. And so now we're going to carry on and do the rest of the land. So the subsoiling side of the process has now been completed, and you can see the pattern very clearly. It hasn't really disturbed the soil that much, it's just lifted it up from underneath and cut grooves through on contour between the tree rows, and it's now well aerated and it's loose enough now for us to take the next step, which is to prep the land for planting. And so the next stage in the operation is to run this chappie over the land. It's a hand tractor, very simple thing, and it's got a PTO on the back, which we don't really use. You know, our main use for this device is the rotavator, and in this context we're not going to be rotavating the soil. So what we do now is we run this thing very lightly over the soil surface, and it doesn't turn the soil, it just breaks the clods. So we use it very much like you would a crumble roller on the back of a keyline plough or a high-end subsoiling plough. So these blades just run across the top of the surface, break the clodding up, and then what they also do is just level off the field a bit and create a much better tilth for the planting of the grass seed. so we've got a much better chance of decent germination and overall take on the sowing process. So we want to get as much grass going in this area as possible. So what we will be doing then is planting it mainly in the furrows created by the subsoiler. So right, so the flattening and leveling has been done with the hand tractor. You can see the land now. We've been going at this since about 9 o'clock this morning, and it's done. Now we're just going to put the seeds in this evening, and it's a bit windy now to sow them in. They're just going to blow away, and then we're going to come over and just hit it in with rakes manually so that the birds don't eat everything, and then set the irrigation system, give it a wet, and then just manage it from there. It'll start germinating in about 2 to 3 weeks. Okay, so here I am in the agroforestry olive system, and all the grass has been planted now. We broadcasted it by hand and we tamped it in with a rake, and now we're irrigating to encourage its germination, and we'll keep the soil in the system really nice and moist for the next 6 weeks or so that those young grass seedlings can establish themselves. And I'm now walking over a very soft and spongy field. Water infiltration is fast and it goes in deep, and you can feel it underfoot, and this field is now ready to boom. And by the time we get to January, we're sitting in September now, we'll be able to bring livestock in, or we'll be able to bring in lucerne harvest in. The field will be properly established and growing at optimum level. And you can see the value of the subsoiling process. It's a way of increasing the effectiveness of the mineral cycle and the water cycle on any piece of land. And in the entire process, we didn't add any minerals, we didn't add any compost. We did nothing but deepen the soil and open it up so that soil life has a better context to thrive. And in that process, the soil was not tilled, it was just opened up. And there lies the value in the subsoiling process. It's a very simple approach to land restoration, and with proper livestock integration and proper cover crop planting, whether that's production cover cropping or a pioneer cover cropping where you're trying to build soil health further, you have the ideal context for supercharging the process of succession.